Hi, everyone. Today, we're stepping into a story that may feel like fiction until you realize it's stitched together with truths we've all seen. A packed conference room, a CEO in a $1,000 suit, an engine on the brink of catastrophe, and a black woman in jeans and a hoodie who was never supposed to be there, let alone win. This story isn't about superheroes. It's about what happens when someone is quietly erased, publicly humiliated, and still chooses to stand in the fire. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, let's begin. The lights in the Vertex Aerotech conference hall gleamed with corporate polish. Reporters clutched notepads, engineers whispered behind tablets, and the air smelled faintly of leather briefcases and espresso. It was supposed to be a routine demonstration, another flashy reveal in Detroit's tech quarter. But what they got instead was a reckoning. At the center of the stage stood a single woman. Her hoodie was gray, her jeans plain, and her boots a little scuffed. But the weight she carried made the whole room lean in. Her name was Dr. Alina Brooks, 41 years old, former NASA propulsion specialist, now a community educator running a scrappy science club out of a public library in Atlanta. And she wasn't here to make friends. The man who had summoned her now stood at the podium like a preacher ready for a baptism. Everett Langston, CEO of Vertex Aerotech. His navy suit was immaculate. His smile was not. "You've got 30 minutes, Dr. Brooks," he said, letting the microphone carry his voice across the crowded hall. "Fix the RS-91 prototype. Prove you still belong in this room." A few engineers chuckled behind their hands. Reporters looked up from their laptops. Langston let the silence thicken before tossing a wrench to the ground near Alina's feet like a dare. She didn't flinch, just stared at the engine. It shimmered under the spotlights, sleek silver, and humming faintly. But to Alina, it wasn't beautiful. It was familiar, uncomfortably so. 7 years ago, she had designed something like this under a government-funded initiative called Project Sentinel. The core resonance curve, the thermal dispersal unit, it wasn't just similar. It was hers. Bent, mutilated, misused, and now paraded on stage as Vertex's breakthrough. That night when the envelope arrived in her Atlanta mailbox, she almost threw it away. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just a formal invitation to consult on a design issue. $10,000 promised. No contract required, but she knew what it meant. They weren't offering her respect. They were offering her a trap. And yet, she came. Because while Langston wanted a show, what Alina saw in that engine was something worse than theft. She saw danger. Because the flaw in that design, if it went live, wouldn't just break a machine, it would break lives. In the front row, Evelyn Kwan, Vertex's lead engineer, leaned toward her colleague Rob Mercer, whispering, "She won't last 10 minutes. Watch, he's going to roast her." Rob smirked. "Watch her fumble and blame the tools." Alina heard it, all of it, but her eyes never left the RS-91. She knelt slowly, picked up the wrench with her right hand scarred from a lab explosion years ago, and walked toward the engine. Her fingers trembled slightly, but it wasn't fear. It was memory, muscle deep and bitter. Everett Langston turned to the crowd, speaking like a host on a reality show. "Let's see what a former engineer turned school teacher can do with $1 billion problem." Some laughed. Alina didn't. She placed her hand on the intake valve and closed her eyes. Her heartbeat slowed. It was hers. Not inspired by, not loosely based on, hers. The resonance framework, the airflow syncopation, even the thermal shielding unit marked with 3 subtle grooves, her old design tag. She had buried that design the day Nathan Crow betrayed her. The man she'd once loved, the partner she trusted, the man who stole everything, including her future. That night in Houston, she had walked in on Nathan copying project data to an unauthorized drive. When she confronted him, he looked her in the eye and said, "Do you really think they'll give you credit? You're decoration, Alina. They need you until they don't." She'd slapped the drive from his hand, but it was too late. Security arrived. She was labeled the breach, investigated, then quietly let go, no hearing, no defense. Just gone. Now she was back, and the lie had followed her. Langston stepped closer, lowering his voice. Just so we're clear, he whispered, you touch that engine and you're responsible for what happens next. She met his gaze. That's why I came. The tension in the room crackled like static. The media leaned in. The engineers snickered. The lights blazed. And Alina Brooks began. She removed the outer panel, ran her hand across the stabilization bracket. Her fingers paused. A vibration. Not right. Her instincts kicked in. Pressure bleed occurring too fast. Temperature readings too low at idle. Fuel intake delay inconsistent with flight throttle sync. None of it added up unless someone had altered the design deliberately. She looked up. Everett watched her arms crossed. Alina turned to the nearest technician. I need a digital torque calibrator and a thermal buffer readout now. The young man hesitated. I need supervisor approval. You just got it, she said. The technician blinked, then moved. In the audience, Evelyn Kwan straightened. Wait, did she just ask for a buffer readout, she whispered. Why would she? Then she saw it. The pressure readings flickering on the wall display, the resonance line skipping just once. Alina had seen it first, because she'd seen it before. The same malfunction that had almost caused a test explosion years ago. Covered up. Silenced. The engine hummed. The room held its breath. And Dr. Alina Brooks stood before the machine that nearly ended her career, hands steady, voice calm, and truth rising like heat from the floor. The lights above the stage hummed faintly, casting a sterile glow on the RS-91 prototype. Alina's hands moved with increasing confidence, less like she was repairing someone else's failure, more like she was reclaiming something that was stolen. The resonance shift she'd felt earlier wasn't just a random defect. It was too specific, too familiar, and far too dangerous to be accidental. A vibration tickled her palm, subtle but telling. She reached around the left side of the combustion housing, opened a hidden panel with a quick turn of the wrist, and exposed a delicate tangle of wires and fiber optic diagnostics. Her face hardened. The intake regulator had been reversed. Whoever made the adjustment had tried to force a cheaper component into a pressure-sensitive node. It would hold for a test, sure, but at 35,000 feet, with full throttle and altitude pressure, it would tear itself apart. Mid-air, she turned slowly, speaking to no one and everyone. If this thing flies, it will kill people. The words cut through the room like a blade. Engineers stopped typing. The press froze. Even Everett's practiced grin faltered. Excuse me, Evelyn Kwan stood now, eyes narrowed. You heard me, Alina said louder. The regulator's backwards. The governor's faked. Your test rig is masking the harmonic feedback. Someone built this to pass inspection, not to survive flight. Dr. Brooks Langston interjected, stepping forward. You're making quite an accusation. I'm stating a fact, she snapped, eyes locked on his. And I know because I designed the original version of this engine 7 years ago under Project Sentinel. The same design this one was copied from. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was dread. The cameras turned. Recorders clicked on. Reporters leaned forward, eyes wide. Langston's smile cracked. Now wait just a second. Alina didn't give him the chance. She reached into the inside pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a flash drive no bigger than a car key. She held it up. This drive contains the original schematics for the prototype that evolved into the RS-91, including signed code files, timestamped documents, and thermal test simulations. All logged under my credentials, Dr. Alina R. Brooks, NASA. Rob Mercer barked a short, nervous laugh. Anyone could fake that. Alina turned toward the wall display and walked calmly to the side terminal. Then let's find out. She plugged the drive in. The screen flickered, then burst into light. Blueprints bloomed across the display. Diagrams, equations, compression ratio tables. But what made the room truly fall silent were the signatures in the lower right corners of every single document. A.R. Brooks, Chair, NASA, 2016, Project Sentinel. Gasps broke out. One reporter dropped his pen. Evelyn Kwan's tablet slipped from her fingers. Alina didn't gloat. She stepped back and folded her arms. This is not a coincidence, she said. This is theft. And if you don't shut that engine down permanently, someone's going to pay for it with their life. Langston was already moving toward her. You have no authority. Oh, I do, she said, reaching again into her bag. She produced a letter stamped with the emblem of the U.S. Department of Justice. She handed it to the event moderator, who read it in silence, his eyes widening with every line. "This is a cease and desist," the moderator finally announced. "Filed this morning, backed by federal IP law and aerospace security protections." Langston turned pale. The audience shifted, murmuring louder now. This was no longer a product launch. This was a scandal live on camera. "You're sabotaging this event," Langston said under his breath. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Alina's expression didn't change. "I'm not the one who sold a stolen design and called it innovation." She turned to the nearest technician. "I need a fluke gauge, a modulator key, and a clean diagnostic scan now." The young man stared at her. "Please," she added, her voice softening just slightly. He moved. Faster than before, Evelyn Kwan stepped forward. "This can't be real. Those files, how do we know they weren't hacked?" Alina walked over to the engine again and opened a side compartment, revealing a thermal control node tucked behind insulation. She pointed to a small engraved mark on the corner panel. "See that it was faint, almost invisible, but unmistakable. A series of initials carved with the technician's hand, ARB 2016. "They didn't even try to hide it," Alina said quietly. Evelyn's mouth opened, then closed. She said nothing else. And then something changed. In the upper rows, a woman in a red blazer stood. "I was part of the original procurement team at NASA," she said, her voice trembling. "I remember those specs. I remember that project." Langston tried to speak, but the woman raised her hand. She was the lead systems designer. Everyone in propulsion knew her name until it disappeared. The room shifted again. Cameras focused. Reporters raised their hands. Questions flew like shrapnel. "When was the design stolen? Was this cover-up intentional? Do you have any comment about Nathan Crow's role in the original NASA breach?" Langston shouted above them. No comment. "We're suspending this event's security," but no one moved. The attention wasn't on him anymore. It was on her. Dr. Alina Brooks, the engineer they tried to erase. Alina took a breath. She glanced at the diagnostic panel one more time. Her hands worked without shaking now. Her voice rang clear. "We can keep arguing, or we can fix this before it blows." For a moment, no one moved. Then Evelyn Kwan slowly walked to her side. "What do you need?" she asked. Alina looked at her. A clean line to the cooling loop and someone to hold the gauge steady. "I can do that," Evelyn said. Langston took one step toward the stage. "You're not authorized to." Evelyn turned and looked directly at him. "Then fire me." Langston said nothing. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in the room, but in the story. The control panel blinked red. Pressure was rising again. Alina turned to the intern. "Now!" She dove back into the engine, her hand on the coolant valve, her eyes scanning the feed. The hum intensified. The crowd watched paralyzed. And then, a single, sharp twist. The vibration stopped. The red light blinked once. Then green. Stable. The audience let out a collective breath. Alina stood slowly, her hands covered in grease, her scarred wrists trembling from the strain. But her eyes never left the engine. It was alive. But it was no longer Everett Langston's. The moment the RS-91's diagnostic screen flicked to green silence, stretched across the room like a taut wire ready to snap under the weight of everything it had just witnessed. Then someone clapped. Just once. Slow. Deliberate. A single beat in the ocean of stunned faces. Another person joined in. Then another. And then applause broke out, not with fanfare or politeness, but with raw, stunned respect for the woman they had been told was disposable. Dr. Alina Brooks didn't bow. She didn't beam. She simply stepped away from the humming engine and wiped her hands on a towel handed to her by the same intern who had once hesitated. In the front row, Evelyn Kwan looked shaken. Not from fear, but from clarity. She picked up her tablet from the floor, still displaying the old test schematics, and held it like it weighed 20 pounds. "I worked with these specs for 2 years," Evelyn whispered. "And not once did anyone tell me where they came from." Alina turned to her gently. "They told you what you needed to believe, because asking questions meant risking your seat at the table." A few seats over, Rob Mercer stared down at his MIT class ring, twisting it slowly on his finger, as if unsure what it now meant. Langston hadn't moved from his position near the back of the stage. But something had changed. His arms were still crossed, but his posture sagged slightly. His polished smile was gone, replaced by a grimace so tight it looked surgical. He stepped forward, voice like cold steel. "Let's be clear about something." The audience stilled. Cameras panned. "Even if your claims hold water, Langston said you just performed a repair on our prototype, on our platform, during our event." The shift was subtle but dangerous. Legal ground. Alina recognized it instantly. "You're implying that because I stabilized your dangerous prototype, I now represent your company." Langston's mouth tightened. "You worked on it, Dr. Brooks. That's a matter of record. In fact, the video feed confirms it." And there it was. The trap. "Ah," Alina said softly. The fine print. That $10,000 carrot wasn't a reward. It was bait. She turned to the moderator, who still held the Department of Justice cease and desist letter. "Am I currently under contract with Vertex Aerotech?" The moderator shook his head quickly. No formal documents were signed. "Then let the record show," Alina said, lifting her voice for the audience and the press. "I am not employed by Vertex. I was not contracted. I never agreed to represent them." She stepped directly in front of Langston. Her voice dropped just slightly. "You wanted me here to clean up your disaster, give you a shield, and vanish. But I don't vanish anymore." Gasps echoed again. And then came the breaking point. From the rear aisle, a hand went up. A reporter from a national aerospace publication stood. "Dr. Brooks, do you have proof that Vertex acquired these designs from your former colleague, Nathan Crow?" Alina nodded once, then turned back to the main screen. She slid another flash drive into the port. The screen changed again, this time showing archived email chains, internal NASA memos, time-stamped project logs, all pointing to Crow. One highlighted email stood out from Nathan, crowinasa.gov, to Everett, Langston, evertexaero.com. Subject, initial designs. Clean version. The audience stirred. Langston stepped forward, his voice louder, now strained. "Those documents are stolen. You've committed a breach of confidentiality." But he was cut off by another voice, one that had not spoken yet. "Those are whistleblower materials." It was James Porter, former senior engineer at NASA, who had quietly entered through the side door just minutes earlier. Gray beard, worn suit, no fanfare. He stepped into the light. "I held on to the backups after the breach, because I knew something wasn't right." Langston's voice dropped to a growl. "You were ordered to destroy all copies." "I didn't," Porter said simply. "Because destroying the truth isn't the same as ending a problem. It just delays it until someone dies." Reporters rushed the front. Phones shot into the air. Alina let out a slow breath. The story was no longer just her word. It was backed now by documents, by experts, by data, by truth. Langston turned sharply. "This entire event is off the record. You're all violating protocol?" "Sir," said a new voice over the loudspeaker. "We've just been informed the DOJ has launched a formal inquiry. You may want to step away from the microphones." The voice belonged to a Vertex communications director, his tone clipped and full of damage control. Langston looked stunned. He stepped back. And in that space, literal and symbolic, Alina moved forward. "I'm not here to destroy a company," she said, her voice soft but unshakable. "I'm here to stop a lie from becoming a death toll, to stop another young girl from having her work erased, her name replaced, her dreams traded for convenience." She turned to the cameras. "I want accountability, not revenge, but I will not allow this company or any company to profit from silence." In the crowd, someone shouted, "Do you want a seat at the board?" Alina smiled gently. "No, I have my own table." Another woman, a grandmother in the third row with a military pin on her lapel, stood slowly. "My grandson's a test pilot. If you hadn't spoken up today, would anyone have told him this engine was faulty?" Langston didn't answer. He couldn't. The woman shook her head, then looked at Alina. "Thank you for not staying silent." And just like that, the tide turned. People stood. Engineers removed their badges. The press lined up at the stage. Everett Langston backed away from the spotlight, each step slower than the last. Because his kingdom wasn't just crumbling, it was being recorded one frame at a time. And at the center of it all stood the woman he tried to erase, proof that truth once spoken doesn't just echo, it multiplies. The engine sat quiet now, purring in stable silence, like a beast tamed under command. But the conference hall wasn't silent, not anymore. The weight of denial, of arrogance, of injustice had broken, and what remained was a storm of reckoning. Security didn't escort Dr. Alina Brooks out. They escorted Everett Langston. Not in handcuffs, not yet, but with enough murmurs and stares to suggest his time was no longer his own. His finely tailored suit didn't carry him anymore. He walked like a man who tripped on the very stage he built, trying to gather dignity from the floor. As the room shifted, Alina remained still grounded, like the weight of her truth had finally taken root. Evelyn Kwan approached her first slowly, with no clipboard, no arrogance, just her voice. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. Alina looked at her not with anger, but with exhaustion. "I don't want your apology," she replied. "I want your honesty. When you saw that engine starting to fail, what did you think?" Evelyn looked down, then back up. "I thought, if I said something, I'd be the next one cut." Alina nodded. "That's what silence costs." James Porter, the retired NASA engineer who had revealed the backup evidence, stepped beside them now. His hands were steady, but his eyes glistened. "They buried your name, Alina, but they couldn't bury the data. And you brought the story back with fire." Alina gave him a tired smile. "I didn't bring fire, James. I just stopped pretending I didn't see smoke." The press now swarmed the stage microphones, bobbing lenses zoomed in. Alina answered the first few questions with clipped clarity. Yes, those were her designs. Yes, she had been dismissed without cause. No, she wasn't seeking restitution. But one reporter asked what no one else dared. "Dr. Brooks, now that the world knows, what will you do next?" Alina paused. Her gaze lifted past the audience, past the cameras to a place only she could see. "I'm going home," she said. "There's a group of kids waiting on a rocket lesson Monday morning, and I'm not going to be late." Laughter rippled, soft but real. Another voice called out, "What about NASA? You're cleared now. They'll want you back." Alina's reply was gentle but firm. "I don't need to return to a seat at a table I helped build just to be reminded it was never meant for me. I'm building a new one." From the wings of the room, a few engineers removed their lanyards, holding them like relics. One of them, a young man named Tyler, who'd been quiet all morning, stepped forward. "I read your paper," he said. "The one on suborbital stabilization. They used it in a training module, but your name wasn't on it." Alina nodded. "I know." He looked down. "It inspired me to study aerospace." She placed a hand on his shoulder. Then it did its job. Meanwhile, Langston's team of legal advisors and PR reps circled like vultures around a fallen beast, desperate to salvage what they could. But the crowd had shifted its gravity. The story was no longer about Vertex's engine. It was about how it came to exist and who was missing when it did. Backstage, Evelyn returned with a manila envelope in her hand. "Found this in the diagnostics archive," she said. "It's the original heat test results. The real ones." Alina opened the folder, flipping through charts stamped with false success markers. The actual readings told another story. Pressure spikes, coolant failure feedback, irregularities, 3 consecutive failures scrubbed clean for a press release. "How long have these been buried?" she asked. Evelyn's voice cracked. "Since last August." Alina looked her in the eye. "You knew." "I suspected," Evelyn admitted. "But Langston, he made it clear that doubts weren't welcome." Alina nodded. "And truth still isn't convenient." From the control booth above, James Morrison, Vertex's own technical director, shut down the live stream feed. He removed his headset, packed up his notes, and walked toward the back exit without a word. One of the interns called out, "Aren't you going to speak up?" He paused. "I already did," he said. "I stayed quiet for 2 years. That's what my silence said." The floor below vibrated softly as the last system test looped its cycle. Still stable, still purring, still hers. The moderator returned to the stage and handed Alina a document with a shaky hand. "They've drafted an immediate settlement agreement," he said. 7-figure payout, a public apology, consulting title if you want it." Alina looked at it for a full beat, then folded it in half. "Tell them thank you," she said. But I'm not for sale. Gasps rose again, even among those who had supported her. You'd walk away from all that someone asked. After everything, she turned toward the voice. Her response was a whisper with steel in it. I already lost everything once. I don't need their permission to be whole again. As she stepped off the stage, the applause began again. This time not hesitant. This time not for spectacle. It was for resistance, for clarity, for someone who didn't blink when the full weight of corporate arrogance tried to crush her. She made her way to the edge of the crowd where George, a janitor in a crisp uniform, stood waiting with a bottle of water and a grin. You really told them, he said with a chuckle. Told them what she asked, taking the water. That history doesn't belong to the loudest man in the room. Alina smiled. No, it belongs to the one who built the room. George glanced at the stage, then back at her. So, what now? She nodded toward the hallway. Now I go home. There's a blueprint of a paper rocket I promised to help finish. And with that, she walked out of the building, the door swinging quietly behind her, not to thunder, not to sirens. Just the quiet, unshakable truth finally stepping into the light. It was Monday morning in Atlanta, and the sun had barely risen when the Washington Carver Public Library's old neon open sign buzzed to life. The concrete still held traces of weekend rain, and the city moved slower than usual, like even the traffic lights understood the weight of a new week. Inside the library, the science annex hummed with anticipation. Folding chairs had been rearranged around the battered lab tables, and the storage bins, labeled Aviation Club, sat open, revealing soldering kits, plastic tubing, and half-built model drones. Dr. Alina Brooks was already there, coffee in one hand, toolbox in the other. Her hoodie sleeves were rolled up, her scarred wrist peeking through as she lined up the tools on the counter. To anyone who hadn't seen the footage from Detroit, she looked like just another community volunteer. But for the dozen kids who raced into that room, backpacks dropping, eyes wide, she was a legend now. A living, breathing answer to every time someone told them they weren't enough. A girl named Trinity raised her hand before class even started. Miss Alina, she said, her voice serious, is it true you built an engine that could fly a plane and saved everyone from it blowing up? The room went quiet. Alina smiled. I helped stop a bad version of something I once loved. And now, she added, reaching for a schematic printout, I want to teach you how to build a better one. Cheers broke out. A boy with glasses nearly knocked over his chair trying to grab the soldering iron. Another student pulled a drone kit from their backpack and beamed with pride. Across the hallway, George leaned on a mop handle, watching from the doorway with quiet satisfaction. The newspaper tucked under his arm showed a grainy image of Alina standing on stage beside the RS-91. The headline, bold and unfiltered, engineer, vindicated the truth behind the RS-91. Underneath it, in smaller print, Vertex CEO under federal investigation. Brooks declines settlement. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the Atlanta skyline, Alina sat at her kitchen table sipping tea and sorting through letters. Some were from parents, some from reporters. But the one that made her pause came in a heavy government envelope. NASA. She opened it slowly. Inside was a formal offer, a reinstatement, a research grant, a seat on a classified propulsion initiative that would put her name on the next major aerospace patent, and at the bottom, 2 signatures, one from James Porter and one from Evelyn Kwan. They had not only cleared her name, they had endorsed her. She held the letter in her hands, thinking about the lab room she once walked through in Houston, the thrill of watching engines roar to life, the heartbreak of betrayal, the silence that followed, and now this. She closed her eyes, folded the letter, and placed it gently beside her grandmother's old Bible. The doorbell rang. It was Trinity, holding a half-built drone in one hand and a worried expression in the other. I think I broke the pitch controller, she said, and the stabilizer won't listen. Alina looked at the girl's messy hair, her scratched-up sneakers, her trembling hands, and saw 1,000 versions of herself. She stepped outside, locking the door behind her. Well, she said, smiling, let's go fix it. They walked toward the park, the sun brushing gold over the sidewalk, laughter bouncing off brick walls and mailbox posts. The drone bobbed in Trinity's arms like it was already ready to fly. Across the street, the community center stood freshly painted with a new sign bolted above the doorway, the Brooks Institute for Youth Aeronautics. A simple logo accompanied it, drawn by one of her students. It showed a girl with dark skin and curly hair standing atop a rocket, fists raised to the sky. Inside a workshop waited. Kids waited. Not for rescue, but for ignition. And Alina, she wasn't just ready, she had always been. Some stories end with triumph, others with justice. But the best ones, like Alina's, end with purpose. Not the kind that's loud or headlines screaming across screens, but the kind that shows up in the quiet places, a dusty library, a soldering iron passed between small hands, a drone flight that doesn't quite work yet. Dr. Alina Brooks didn't need a spotlight to validate her. She didn't need to be reinstated to feel whole. What she needed, what she reclaimed, was the truth. Her truth. That her work mattered. That her voice mattered. That silence can't outlast integrity. We live in a world where power is often used to erase, to control, to silence. But sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to shrink. One person choosing not to disappear even when the door was slammed shut. That person could be you. Maybe you've been overlooked or told your voice doesn't matter. Maybe someone else has taken credit for your work. Or maybe you've just been waiting quietly hoping someone would see what you've been carrying all along. Let Alina's story remind you what's buried isn't gone. What's stolen can be reclaimed. And what's right still has a place in this world even when no one's watching. So tonight ask yourself, what truth are you holding back? And what would happen if you finally let it fly?